Hello again in this video clip series that I'm calling My Journey to God in a Very Secularized World. Talking about this confusion, in this period. That is part of our punishment. In these years after the Second Vatican Council, when many priests left the priesthood, it seemed up for grabs, the doctrines and the liturgical ceremonies of the Catholic Church. Do whatever you want. And I also was confused, at the beginning. What's going on? What's going on? And you seek for the truth. What's going on? In fact, but later I discovered, that after the Second Vatican Council, I discovered afterwards that there was a well-organized, the Freemasons were very well organized to interpret the council after exactly what they wanted. I'm sure also that even during the council there was already a good number of bishops and priests that were Freemasons. And I think they also perhaps succeeded in some of the documents to put phrases that were rather ambiguous, so that they could be easily manipulated later. But in the whole, I'm very truly convinced that the council was protected by the Holy Spirit, at least up to the essentials of the doctrines. Because if you throw out the Second Vatican Council, you've got to also throw out John Paul II, Pope Benedict, two very holy popes. No, the Vatican Council is valid. But the main problem is, and that's what I'd like to explain now, is that what happened here is that they well organized after the council a misinterpretation in a false way to change the true teachings of the church, and even to penetrate into the Catholic universities and seminaries, so as to lead in a subtle way, in a prideful way, many Catholic priests, seminarians away from the true teachings of the church. There was a good friend of Father Stefano Gobi, who in 2008, Don Stefano Gobi asked him to talk about this at the international retreat annual that in the last few years it's been at Colle Valenza here in Italy, at the Sanctuary of the Merciful Love of Mother Speranza. And in his little talk there, he said this in this talk, talking about this organized, a well-organized misinterpretation of Second Vatican II. And you can find in my website, on the index, this article that's called A Well-Organized Misinterpretation of VC2, Vatican Council II. And he said it's an attack on the truth of God. He says it grew gradually. He said it is enough to think of a subtle change that happened around the time of the Second Vatican Council, with the arrival of the experts, those posts that they were so intelligent and went with their bishop. There developed the fashion of theologians, regardless of whether or not they deserved the name. The fact that they had published a book in general was enough to be called an expert. This continues, and with this, the center that guides the church in the minds of many had shifted from where God had placed it in the hierarchy, the Pope and the bishops in union with him, and became the various opinions of all sorts of writers. And he said the students collected these books, and because you felt it was important to read these books, and you knew more than the others. And so this has had an impact not only on the priests, but also on seminaries and many Catholic universities. This is the first part of the attack on the truth of God, the foundation of the church. As we know, in this period, as I said before, it's much easier to give the blame at the people on the top and so on, and shoot everybody down, because no one wants to admit it's our fault. I wrote several times on Facebook that, what can for example, two holy popes do, or three holy popes do, Paul VI, John Paul II, and Benedict do if the majority, if not the great majority, of bishops and priests do not obey them. Like I said before in one of the video clips, when I was in Barstow, there was a priest 60 years ago who said the Latin Mass in 15 minutes. His heart wasn't there. What I explained before, if a priest celebrates the Novus Ordo but obeys the liturgical books, it's equally reverent if he believes. It depends really on the faith of the priest and the people. But I'll admit that when the Latin, that it's more difficult. You can't change the words, but you can lose your faith, though. It's true that in the Novus Order, it's easier for the priest to disobey. That's true. But you can't put everybody in handcuffs. You can't say, okay, we're going to put everybody in handcuffs, so you're forced to celebrate the Mass, you're supposed to be, and have the faith. You can't force the heart, or you can't force salvation. And so it's true that in the Novus Ordo it's easier to disobey, which is what happened by so many. In other words, which happened to so many that what happened, that they made the exception the rule. They no longer obeyed the rules. And there was exceptions with certain conditions. But very quickly, the people don't obey. They make the exception the rule because that's the way they like it. That's the way they like it. And so that's what the situation we're in today. I would like to also, something I found on the Facebook, someone met a few years ago, that I found that someone said that Padre Pio indicated that there would be 2 false popes in this period. And he said the second much worse than the first. And I believe that this second Masonic pope will probably order all priests and bishops to take an oath of blind obedience to him, not to Jesus and the truth of Christ. You can find an article I wrote on this a few years ago. He says, then after that oath, all the priests and bishops will be ordered to accept the new Mass without the words of consecration, which will then begin the prophecy of Daniel, which Jesus made reference in Matthew 24:15. And he called it the abomination of desolation. And what we're talking about here, we can get a lot of information from second letter of Thessalonians chapter 2 from St. Paul. St. Paul tells us that before the man of lawlessness is revealed, the son of perdition, the Antichrist, only he who now restrains it will do so until he is out of the way. That restraint, I'm totally convinced, is exactly this prophecy of Daniel. That is, when we lose the Eucharist in all the public churches of the world, 3.5 years, then the Antichrist can manifest himself. And as St. Paul wrote, he says, above all, what is restraining the man of lawlessness is the presence of Jesus Christ in the truth, and especially his real presence in the most holy Eucharist, the holy sacrifice of the Mass. Satan seeks to trivialize both the truth and the Eucharist, so as to deprive us of God's guidance and of his powerful protection and help. Before the manifestation of the Antichrist, this prophecy of Daniel, the continual burnt offering will be taken away, and the sacrifice and offering will cease. Daniel 9:27, which Jesus foretold, Matthew 24:15. This sacrilege is the ultimate abomination of desolation. And so for the last 3.5 years of this period of the Great Tribulation, Matthew 24:21, the continued burnt offering, that is the valid Holy Mass, the Eucharist, will be taken away in all the public churches of the world. I believe that this valid Holy Mass, the Eucharist, will be taken away in a very sly, disguised way. I'm convinced also, as they talked in another video clip, given the 4 conditions for a valid Mass, the point where they will attack is to take away the consecration. Most likely, in the name of the world crisis, we must celebrate all together in the universal fraternity, and so we must celebrate all together. And the priest at that point will be forbidden to say the normal Catholic Mass and the words of the consecration. It will be done in a very, very smooth way, and this will begin the great prophecy of Daniel. It's interesting also, this is a little bit of sideline here, that the only verse in the entire Bible that has the number 666 is John chapter 6, verse 66. And in that verse, 666, it's when many disciples refused the teaching of the Eucharist of Jesus and went away. It's interesting. They refused the Eucharist, the only verse in the whole Bible, 666. You can find many other articles on my website on this that will in greater detail. I will finish this video clip here. May God bless you and Mary guide you.